welcome back to Geek Out Gaijin, and for this episode it's gonna be all about retro video game collecting here in Japan. And as always, I am your Pinoy otaku in Japan but not in Tokyo, Hagi Potato. Let's get it started. And before we properly start the bulk of our presentation, I would just like to answer one very, very real question that you guys have in regards to retro video game collecting. So, is Japanese video games cheap right now in 2022? Now, the best answer that I could give you for that is not everywhere and not all the time. But if you're gonna ask me if retro video games in Japan are cheap for common items, then definitely yes, you could find them for 100 yen up to 500 yen in selected stores, but we will elaborate on that later. Okay, now one of the main reasons why it took me this long to actually get into retro video game collecting here in Japan is simply because when I arrived here back in 2016, everything was so jacked up. I was checking out simple common items like Street Fighter. They would be priced at 1,500 yen to 2,500 yen, and I would check out my favorite game of all time, which is Rockman 2 for the family computer, NES on the US, and they would be priced at around 2,000 yen on a loose figure with dents and scratches and some names on there. So that was not really a time for me to start collecting retro video games, and it quite gave me a shock. So even though video games is my primary love, my primary hobby, I have to actually hold on collecting and getting back into retro video game at that time, because when something that you want to collect has the same price tag as the latest game coming out during those times, you really would be thinking again, if am I gonna be able to play this, or am I just gonna display it? So I held back during that time and only focused on collecting video games, rather collecting recent or rather modern video games during that time. So fast forward to months back, I started getting the itch of getting back into playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which is, in my opinion, is the greatest fighting game of all time. I know, each and everyone has their opinions, but this is mine. Anyway, so I got a copy of it for 1,900 yen, more or less. I forgot if that included the tax or not. So that was the cheapest I have ever found that game. But recently I also found it for 1,500 yen. Anyway, so during this recent times, I just realized that, hey, maybe getting back into retro video game collecting is not such a bad idea at the current state of the video game collecting community has been so confusing. I have seen other bloggers complain about getting into emulation and whatnot because every price of a video game is so jacked up. But that is not actually true when it comes to Japan, and I would want to express that I did my research, which I would be making a montage of, because after getting that PlayStation 2 months back, I got into retro video game collecting, and it was a mixed match of. During my toy collecting, I would specifically check PlayStation 1 areas, Dreamcast, Sega Saturns, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and I have just recently found out that this is the right time to actually collect Japanese retro video games. And I even got some very welcome surprises during my video game and toy hunts, which I would be showing you later. Really quite surprising. Anyway, here's a montage of some of the recent retro video game hauls that I got.
University, and look, I found an R1 version of Final Fantasy 13 and another Marvel vs. Capcom 3, the regular edition. This is something I'm really quite surprised and finding R1 versions uploaded by BOOKOFF in the price of 500 euros. Non-scale, but if you're into toy photography or we're done with the figure section. We're gonna check out the video game section now. Going into remake.
Now you have a general idea of which of the main manufacturers are more pricier than the others. So, and based on what I have seen on various video game stores and recycle shops, is that Nintendo is always the king of being the one that has stable pricing. As for the pricier end, if you are collecting, for example, Neo Geo and Sega Dreamcast, which is one of my favorite retro consoles, it's gonna be a lot harder to find, and if you do find them, they would be pricier. But if you are collecting for this particular video games, which or rather consoles, which the titles are almost mostly made up of arcade titles and fighting games, then you know that it is so much pricier back in the West, with scalpers and shipping costs really costing that really high. So if you are gonna come to Japan and you are a big fan of fighting games, then I definitely would not really see you complaining about these prices, because $30, $20 up to $50 is not really that expensive if you are looking for these titles. Also, on that note, the priciest, or rather the most expensive video game that I have seen when it comes to fighting games on my recent video game and toy hunts is that Street Fighter Grandmaster Edition, which go for $200. So I'm really staying away from that one, since there is a lot of re-releases. Anyway, now speaking of re-releases, I think this is one of the reasons why it is such a great time to be a retro video game collector right now, with a recent fighting game collections and various platformer collections being released for the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch and the Xbox and on Steam. I think that is one of the main driving forces why retro video games are becoming common now on my video game and toy hunts, since it is already readily accessible for more modern players, and with the PC gaming community growing more and more, including my son. My son does not. He has a Nintendo Switch, and I gave him my laptop, and most of the time he is playing his laptop with Steam because it's really cheap. So having that particular option for more modern gamers has, in my opinion, dragged down the pricing of retro video games. So that is such a huge win-win for us collectors, and that is why I was able to get back into retro video game collecting now. Anyway, getting back into our discussion. So Dreamcast, Sega Saturn, Neo Geo, those would be the pricier end of things right now. So I have stayed away from those. But here I have a stack here of Dreamcast games that are cheap. Now, one of this is the Sonic Adventure. You could find this particular game ranging around 500 yen to 250 yen. So if you're a fan of it, or you just want a copy and you don't want to go and find a US version of this one, so go grab it whenever you get a chance when you're here. Also, Power Stone. I grabbed this for 720 yen, so not really that pricey. So $7, huge win-win. And this is the one that I was really happy about. Although my copy has a huge crack on the front that is easily replaceable, but I do not really want to replace it. So crack on the front, but I grabbed this for under $10. So really huge win. Another dollar game that I got is this Resident Evil Code Veronica. So still playable even if it's in all Japanese. If you have played this before, I think even with the language, in the different language, still very playable. Anyway, let's move on to the bulk of the collection that I got recently in retro video game collecting. PlayStation is really awesome to collect for right now, including Xbox. If you are a huge Xbox fan, if you want to collect for the OG Xbox 360, those two particular consoles, even some Xbox Series X, the most recent console, and the Series I really have a huge problem when it comes to the recent Xbox naming. Anyway, Generation 3 Xbox and Generation 4 Xbox are even cheap nowadays. So anyway, getting back into the PlayStation. PlayStation collecting right now is really good. I got this huge stack of PlayStation 2 games, mostly fighting games, and with the exception of one game, most of this are under $10 each, with some of them even costing around 100 to 200 yen. So this huge stack is under around, I think it's about $50 if we take out Marvel vs. Capcom 2. So Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is actually the most expensive out of this lot, as I have told you guys earlier. So if you're collecting for PlayStation 2, go ahead, really cheap right now. Even if you are just gonna be collecting these games for their cover art or something to display with, like, look at this awesome Star Ocean till the end of time. Awesome cover, clear packaging. This is one of the things that I really like about this Japanese version. Anyway, going a little bit further back, PlayStation 1 one of my favorite fighting games, Rival Schools. I got this, I think 500 yen. This around 1,000 yen, and this one, Tekken 3. I know most of you guys have really fun memories of this one, 300 yen. So, and now the surprising find in regards to PlayStation is PlayStation 3. So I haven't bought a new PlayStation 3 this year, but this is just from the last 3 days, and most of this only costs 150 to 300. And what is surprising is, if you could see here, I have gotten a lot of R1, or rather US region, Western release PlayStation 3 games. Just check this out. I got Final Fantasy 13 for 300 yen. I even got Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch for $10. Stranglehold, got this for 600 yen. Puppeteer, the Puppeteer is Japanese version, but this has full English language support. So if you're like me, you really like this particular game. And so that's the surprising part, is that I have seen US region 1 games here, but really far and in between, and mostly only the game that does not really have a Japanese release, or maybe it's the odd copy of a gaijin who does not. A gaijin is like me, who is a foreigner. So maybe there's a gaijin who just sold his copy because he may be moving away. So really surprising. That's the surprising part about this. So moving along, we also got some complete in-box SFC, or rather Super Famicom titles. And Super Family Computer is the console I grew up with because I live in the Philippines, and most of our early 80s 90s releases all came from Japan. So surprisingly, I got a copy of Street Fighter 2 for 450 yen, you can see here, and a copy of Donkey Kong Country for 480 yen. So complete in box. Although the reason why I got them for cheap is that their boxes are a little bit dinged up, some numbers written on here, but since I already have loose copies of this, I just really needed those boxes for display. I got them, and we're almost done with everything I am showing you in regards to video games. So I would end with this two particular titles, which I believe did not came out in the West. These are the best fighting game for Shonen Jump, or for a manga fighting game, in my opinion. If you are familiar with this, it's Jump Superstars and Jump Ultimate Stars. These are the, if you are familiar with Jump Force, these are the early versions, and this trumps way better than the recent releases, and you really need to be able to check them out and play them, because they have this particular, the battle system is a 2D fighting platformer, very similar to Smash Brothers, but instead of knocking off your opponents, you would shrink their health down, and you could actually tag, and you use the touch screen to tag into the to your reserve characters, and when you are tapping it, it's actually manga panels. So you build a manga panel for your use in your touchscreen side of the Nintendo DS. Really, really awesome, underrated fighting game, in my opinion, which every fighting game should really, really have. So, and since we are at the end of our video, here's a really, really awesome bonus for you guys. Something that most of you collectors, I know most of you collectors are also collecting, is video game original soundtracks. So now this is, I only got this much because retro original soundtracks for video games often go for really, really high prices, but I recently found out, because I only ever bought a separate original soundtrack once, and that is for my favorite video game of all time, which is Final Fantasy Tactics. Cost me around 2,500 yen, so really pricey during that time. But this stack, all of this only costs more or less $10 each. So I went ahead and dove into it. So we got Final Fantasy VII, the original soundtrack, which is the very first soundtrack that I ever really listened to without playing the game, because a friend of mine lent me his copy back in the 90s. So there's that. So some nostalgic stuff on here. So you shout out to Rich Chiga. Anyway, also Eyes on Me, Final Fantasy VIII. We got this around 900 yen, I think, more or less. Final Fantasy 9, we got it for 900 yen. Although this particular version is we don't have the sleeve, so there's that. But since it's a little bit harder to come by, I did not really mind the sleeve. And sometimes, on rare occasions, some BOOKOFFs are selling sleeves or covers or boxes of some video games. So hoping we could get the sleeve for this, 100 yen maybe. Anyway, here's another one of my favorites, Final Fantasy X. Anyway, I got this less 200 yen, priced at 1,100 yen. Got it for 900 yen. Huge steal. And moving on, that is all for our Final Fantasy. Maybe I'm also looking for the Chocobo one, but that one is a little bit pricier whenever I find it, usually around 2,600 to 3,500. So holding off on that one, but I do believe we will find that for a really, really cheap price. And moving along, we got Persona 3, 1,100 yen. Persona 4 Golden, and check this out, 720 yen, huge steal. And 20th anniversary of Persona series. So right now I'm missing Persona 5 for the video game soundtracks. Not really, I don't really recommend getting it now because really pricey. I have seen it quite a couple of times, and it's 2,000 plus, 2,700 yen plus. So not really recommend getting that one. But and for this others, I've seen them priced at the same pricing that I got them for. Really common on most stores, but some stores do have jack up prices of this one. But I do recommend you, if you do visit Japan, to check it out. And just a disclaimer, by the way, huge disclaimer before we get into the end of this video is most of my video game hunting are in the Gunma and Saitama prefecture areas, which is 2 to 3 hours, 1 to 2 to 3 hours outside of Tokyo Metro. So if you do ever get a chance, borders open up, you are really excited to go out and collect, do rent out a car, check out the links. I would be putting Google Map links on the best, which I think are the best places for you to go and do retro video game hunts down in the description below. And I think next time we might even do a top 10 of this particular retro video game stores that also have toys for you guys to check out if ever you do get a chance to do a retro video game hunt here in Japan. And I think that is the all of that I would be able to share with you guys in regards to retro video game collecting. Some last words. There is no one store that you could go to that everything would be 100 yen. All that you would be looking for will be 100 yen. And some of them have really conflicting pricing. Sometimes you find a tech entry on this particular store for 2,000 yen, and you find it for 100 yen, 300 yen on the next store that you go to. So if you come to Japan, you have a lot of free time. Take your time in checking out different stores because you never really know what price you would find them for. And video game and toy hunting in Japan in 2022 is really good. I really recommend, even for some of my fellow gaijins who have been dormant in retro video game collecting here in Japan. Go out, check out the titles now because most of them has gone down in price. But if you are looking for the more obscure titles, and especially if you are looking for platformers like Castlevania and Metroid, those are pricier nowadays, so I don't really recommend those titles. And that is all the knowledge that I am able to share with you guys in terms of retro video game collecting. I hope you guys enjoyed this particular episode, just me talking about retro video game collecting here in Japan. Well, we're here in rural Japan. I did not really mention any particular things in regards to Tokyo because even though I visit Tokyo, I haven't really gone hunting on the Tokyo metro area for the last 2 years because of the pandemic. So I'm just keeping it here in my prefectures. So really sorry if you were expecting me to share some info in regards to Tokyo, but if things are a little bit better, this Pinoy otaku in Japan but not in Tokyo will go to Tokyo, maybe. Anyway, I really love talking about video games and toys. That is why I have created this channel, and it has been my passion. This has been my hobby since I was 6 years old. And the main reason that I actually created this channel is since I am here in Japan, I don't really have people to talk to about my hobby. One of the things that I even thought about when I moved here is that almost all Japanese people would be otakus, and that is a stigma that is so untrue. I always bring up the topic of video games and toys to my workmates, and I rarely get a reaction. I rarely get anything out of them in regards to my hobbies. So I created this channel because I want to be able to express and share with you guys the joys of collecting, the joys of gaming, just the joys in general of being in Japan and being surrounded with this stuff. Anyway, thank you so much, guys. You have been really motivational in my channel, and I really appreciate it. Arigatou gozaimashita. And that is all for this episode. I hope you guys learned something. Comment down below if you did, and if you like my presentation, hit that like button. And thank you so much for watching. This Geek is out of here.